Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels, and as promised, we are starting today our snake oil sales series. Now, we are going to be going all the way back to the beginning, so along with a lot of just horrible things we're going to be reviewing, we're also going to be going all the way back. We're talking the old medical show cards and everything right down to the current modern day. So, before we kick off on the brand new series, real brief disclaimer. Everything that we'll be covering throughout the entirety of the snake oil series, you're going to be finding right there in the description box for you. So that should you like to deep dive on the subject yourself, you'll certainly be able to do so and see exactly where I'm getting my information from. Trigger warnings, real quick folks, we do have this channel marked not for kids for a reason. I do use profanity, and some of the topics that we cover on this channel can be particularly triggering. So if you've got a child that is 16 and younger and they are watching this, parental supervision, very much advised, alright? And I think we do need to review the past. We need to remember the medical traveling fraudsters that would pull out all the stops in order to get you to buy something that you can essentially just call water, technically. Really bad tasting water. And even if it did have some of the effects that they claimed, it was very diluted. You'd have to buy more, right? Just saying. So we're going to be covering it all. And we're going to start with just a real brief article to get ourselves started off. So, we're reading this here. It's an old article, but the information is still pertinent because we're talking about the history. We are not talking about anything within current medicine, necessarily. So, snake oil salesman. The phrase conjures up images of seedy profiteers trying to exploit an unsuspecting public by selling it fake cures. In fact, the Oxford English Dictionary defines snake oil as a quack remedy or panacea. Or panacea. But the OED does not note, forgive me for not knowing how to say that word, however, is that history of snake oil is linked to an often forgotten chapter of Asian American history. So now we're going to get into it. We're going to find out why we call these fraudsters snake oil, which I thought was an interesting tidbit to open up the series with. Because those words snake oil are so evocative, it has been a favorite go-to phrase for politicians and lobbying groups on both sides of the aisle. It's also been a word used by those of us who have been in the trenches fighting against anti-vaxxers and pseudo-medicine for decades. Because that's what it is. And no one's worse than hawking wares these days that do literally nothing than the internet, but we'll come to that later in the series. And, of course, how it all relates back to this. Earlier this month, this is back in the day, folks, Mitch McConnell called his opponent in the Republican primary Tea Party candidate Matt Bevin a snake oil salesman and a campaign mailer. While the campaigning for a second term last year, we're talking back in the day, President Obama referred to the Romney-Ryan tax plan as trickle-down snake oil at a rally. Trickle-down has not worked, folks. We've been trying that for over 40 years. It hasn't worked yet. It's not suddenly going to start now. You want a better economy? Support and help rebuild the middle class. Until that happens, the economy at the very best is going to stagnate. At worst, it's just going to keep getting worse. You don't support the middle class is the one that does the primary buying and consuming. Those who have great wealth tend to sit on that wealth. Those who are poor will pinch pennies until they scream. I know, I've done it. I don't like spending money at all. The people who are a part of the middle class do the spending because now they are able to keep their household down in a way where they don't have to worry about being evicted. They have a little money they can save on a few little extras here and there. Those are the folks who take vacations every summer. Those are the folks who take their kids to different places out in the country for Christmas. Those are the folks who may be able to afford to be able to send their kids to school when they're supported properly. They do the most consumption. So, if you want that to return, you want the economy to fix itself, fix the middle class. It's really that simple. But anyways, sorry. In 2008, the Natural Resources Defense Council Action Fund took out all full-page ads in the Washington Post to denounce the then-President George W. Bush's plan to drill in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, calling it 100% snake oil. Even if it wasn't. We have a very bad habit of Americans of applying old terms like this to completely... It doesn't make sense when it's used as a reference sometimes, is all. But what exactly is snake oil, and why is it peddling it's such a terrible thing? Alright. The 1800s saw thousands of Chinese workers arriving in the United States as indentured laborers to work on the Transcontinental Railroad. According to historian Richard White's book Railroaded, about 180,000 Chinese immigrated to the United States between 1849 and 1882. The vast majority of the workers came from peasant families in the southeastern region of China and were signed to contracts that ran up to 5 years for relatively low wages compared to their white counterparts, wrote David Howard Bain in his book Empire Express. Among the items the Chinese railroad workers brought with them to the States were various medicines, including snake oil. I also get a lot of my different herbs as recommended by both Chinese and old Celt lore, as well as some of the old medicine information you get from some of the older families out here in the Ozark Hills. Made from the oil of Chinese water snake, which is rich in omega-3 acids that help reduce inflammation. Snake oil in its original form really was effective, especially when used to treat arthritis and bursitis. The workers would rub the oil used for centuries in China on their joints after a long, hard day at work. The story goes that the Chinese workers began sharing the snake oil with some American counterparts who marveled at the effects. There are a lot of people in America that have been shocked with just how good Asian medicine is. Me, what blew my mind was their medicinal teas. And I became addicted. And now I have a tea for whatever ails you. You ever become a guest out here? I've got a tea for headache. I've got a tea for indigestion. I got a tea for heartburn. You got an issue? Your stomach hurts? I got a tea. And it's amazing how well that medicine holds up, how well it works. So we can't always discount folk medicine. But for the love of God, in regards to that, use your discernment and your God-given common sense. Okay? If you eat a certain particular seed of grass, it's not going to get you to where you can sprout wings, I promise. Although that would be cool. I'd fly everywhere. All the time. Anyways. So how did a legitimate medicine become a symbol of fraud? The origins of snake oil as a derogatory phrase trace back to the latter half of the 19th century, which saw the dramatic rise in popularity of patent medicines. In particular, the traveling medicine shows, which again we'll get into a little bit more detail on that as we go through the series. often sold on back pages of newspapers. These tonics promise to cure a wide variety of ailments, including chronic pain, headaches, female complaints, and kidney trouble. In the time, all these false cures began to be referred to as snake oil. As the word of healing powers of Chinese snake oil grew, many Americans wondered how they could make their own snake oil here in the United States. See, here's the thing though. You should really learn what snake they're using to make the snake oil. Not all snakes are created equal. This is why we don't take somebody else's idea without learning all the details first. You know, just thought I had. Fact checking is important. Because there were no Chinese water snakes handled in the American West, many healers began to use rattlesnakes to make their own versions of snake oil. This set the stage for entrepreneur Clark Stanley, aka the Rattlesnake King. An 1897 pamphlet about Stanley's life and exploits, the former cowboy claimed he had learned about the healing power of the rattlesnake oil from Hopi medicine men. That was a common thing with the traveling medicine show, folks. They had all kinds of just crazy and outlandish backstories into how they discovered this brand new medicine that cures whatever ails you. It is completely insane. They would come up with, learn this ancient history, this ancient medicine from the Hopi, or from the Cherokee, or from a voodoo magic man. They had some of the craziest made-up backstories as to how they discovered their so-called cures. We're going to be getting into all of them, just simply because it's too fascinating to, and funny, unfortunately, the backstories, not what they did. He never publicly mentioned Chinese snake oil at all. Stanley created a huge stir at the 1893's exposition in Chicago when he took a live snake and sliced it open before a crowd of onlookers. Yay, random violence out of nowhere. Seriously. Joe Schwartz, the director of McGill's University Office for Science and Society, described the scene in this 2008 article. Stanley reached into a sack, plucked out a snake, slit it open, and plunged it into the boiling water. When the fat rose to the top, he skimmed it off and used it on the spot to create Stanley snake oil, a liniment that was immediately snatched up by the throng that had gathered to watch the spectacle. There are two major problems with Stanley's claim about his oil. First, the rattlesnake oil was far less effective than the original Chinese snake oil it was trying to emulate. A 1989 letter to the Western Journal of Medicine from psychiatrist and researcher Richard Kunin revealed that Chinese oil contained almost triple the amount of vital acid as did this rattlesnake oil. Who's surprised? Anybody? Anybody at all?
So this case is going to be heard on October 15th.
Secondly, Stanley's snake oil didn't contain any snake oil at all. The Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 sought to clamp down on the sale of patent medicines, and it was that legislation that led to Stanley's undoing and the rise of the FDA. We're about to show you why that department is actually extremely important and why it is a very bad idea for anyone to be thinking about closing it down. But we'll get into that later, of course. After seizing the shipment of Stanley's snake oil in 1917, federal investigators found that it primarily contained mineral oil, a fatty oil believed to be beef fat, red pepper, and turpentine. That's right, Stanley's signature product did not contain a drop of actual snake oil, and hundreds of consumers discovered they had been had. Let's continue. It was probably around then that snake oil became symbolic of fraud to people like Stanley, like the traveling medical shows. Now, I did find out that a lot of people that medicine shows out in the East Coast, for example, will sometimes put alcohol inside their tonics, which, of course, the person suddenly feels better. They're drunk. Snake oil salesmen and traveling doctors became stock characters in American westerns. The first written usage of the phrase appeared in Stephen Vincent's epic 1927 poem, John Brown's Body, when the poet refers to crooked creatures of 1,000 dubious trades, seller of snake oil balm and lucky rings. About 30 years later, playwright Eugene O'Neill referred to snake oil in his 1956 play, The Iceman Cometh, when a character suggested that a rival was standing on a street corner in a hell right now, making suckers of the damned, telling them there's nothing like snake oil for a bad burn. Why does that sound like our current administration? Kind of wonder if Levitt has a traveling medical man in her family tree somewhere. It would explain so much. Unfortunately for her, she's not nearly even as entertaining as they were. I mean, granted, they're still evil. You get my point. As for what happened to Clark Stanley after it was found that his whole empire was based on a lie, he was fined $20. That's about $429 in today's dollars for violating the Food and Drug Act and for misbranding his product by falsely and fraudulently representing it as a remedy for all pain. Stanley did not dispute the charges. Well, at that point, how could you? How could you, right? Now, there are a lot of modern iterations of the snake oil salesman of yore. And, of course, a lot of people will make comparisons once they kind of see the spectacle in a movie, or they remind you of a used car salesman who's just overexcited and desperate, right? Only difference is they didn't make the wild backstories in order to make people be willing to buy their wares, right? As America became more and more open in the 1800s by having people immigrate from other parts of the world, it began to feed this massive interest in regards to, ancient wisdom from the old world became a massive craze out here back in the 1800s, even out here in the Ozarks, or should I say, especially out here in the Ozarks, where there was a large melding. People coming in from Mexico, we had people coming in from Germany and different places, and eventually they created a little something called the knack, which is its own fascinating topic. But the knack was kind of similar to what they did in China, family teachings in regards to what herbs to use, how to prepare them, and how is this not like the snake oil salesman? The details are very detailed. And usually the types of herbs that they're talking about are the same type of ingredients that you will find in the building blocks of most of your mainstream medicine. So, that being said, though, that made the American public particularly susceptible to fraudmen. People, they would be excited. This is ancient knowledge from the ancient world and this new medicine, and it's going to fix me right up. Because they didn't know any better. And unfortunately, in spite of the high-tech world that we happen to live in, they still don't know any better. And they're willing to believe these folks and turn on science in spite of them seeing the results with their own eyes. Vulnerable people are easily led. I don't like saying it. I've been one of those vulnerable once upon a time. Granted, it's usually harder to get an autistic like me into something like that, but it does happen, and with us it's usually an infection on our environment where we've grown up in particular. But overall, they were very vulnerable to this. Ancient knowledge from the old world, it makes it sound good. But it's a lie. And when somebody goes that hard to create a good backstory, it throws up red flags to me. Because, bro, why are you trying so hard? Right? And if you think they've even stopped with the Chinese cures, my friend, as we go throughout this series, you're going to be in for an education. But for now, that closes out for this Sunday. So, folks, we don't get very many views on this channel. And some of the few we do tend to get removed from time to time. So if you folks would be so kind, please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe. Please don't forget to hit the comments and make sure that you are still set up to receive notifications. We're going to be continuing with this snake oil series as well as down the rabbit hole. And I'm sure with how things have been going with the news, we'll probably end up with more series as well before the year is out. And I don't want you to miss anything. I appreciate your time. And as always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea do hope you have a good one. I will see you next Saturday, folks. And don't forget to be here next Sunday for the next episode. Bye now.